Hey guys, it's Shaylin and I'm here today with another writing video. So in today's video, I'm just going to be doing a little writing, pep talks video. I did one of these videos a very, very long time ago. I think it was like 2018. It was just like 9 writing pep talks in blah, blah, blah minutes or whatever. And at the time it was actually like one of my favorite videos I'd ever made and I wanted to make a follow-up. I don't know if these are exactly pep talks. That's what my initial goal when I was scripting this. I was like, these will be pep talks, but I think that they're more lessons. So today I'm going to be sharing 6, I guess, just really important writing lessons. As I've come to realize these things, I think they've been really important for me, and they're things that I just wanted to share because I feel like all of these things have been just somewhat liberating in a way as I've been approaching my own writing. So let's just jump into it. One of the most important writing skills or lessons that I've learned is to trust your editing skills. I think that so much stress, anxiety, micromanaging yourself through the drafting and even maybe the planning process comes from a lack of trust in your skills as an editor. And I think what's very common is to believe that you don't have the skills as an editor, whether you're thinking this consciously or subconsciously, but for whatever reason, the thought of editing later scares you. And so you feel like if I get it wrong now, I'm never gonna be able to fix it. If I create a flawed draft, it'll be flawed forever because you don't trust in your ability to edit. And the thing is, you will not trust in your ability to edit until you familiarize yourself with editing. I used to be really, really scared of revision. I found it very overwhelming. You've probably heard me talk about this in many videos where I talked about how I found developmental editing in particular to be extremely overwhelming. It was just hard to wrap my mind around how I was supposed to implement large-scale changes to my book. As I went through the process of significant developmental edits on a book for the first time, which was with my novel Honey Vinegar, I'd edited books before, but I almost hadn't even revised them. Like in the past when I had edited books, it was either a light edit or it was a complete rewrite. Like I scrapped it and started from square one. I'd never just taken a manuscript and continued to mold it in like that middle ground way. You know, it was either very light or very extreme. I couldn't really do the in-between because more extreme almost felt less overwhelming. I was very overwhelmed, but as I got more into the editing, I started to enjoy it. It was starting to become very satisfying to see my book starting to like really polish and take shape. I edited another book, my next book, Holding a Ghost. At that point, I didn't even really feel scared going into the editing. Going into the editing, I felt really ready for it and I really enjoyed the editing process. And now I'm drafting another book and I'm honestly looking forward to when I'm going to get to edit it, which is something that I never would have said in the past. And in the past, a lot of issues cropping up in my first draft brought me a lot of stress because I didn't have faith that I could just fix it later. But now, if I'm writing and something isn't perfect and a scene isn't good, or I even feel like there's a large-scale problem with like a whole subplot or something, it honestly doesn't even really stress me out because I just know that I can fix it in editing because I have faith in myself as an editor. It's hard to have faith in yourself as an editor until you have experience editing, but once you have that trust and you trust in future usability to edit the book, it takes so much stress out of the writing process. Editing isn't just about fixing logical or structural issues, it's also about uncovering depth and complexity and nuance, and that's like really beautiful. And I think that that's the beauty of revision, is getting to really hone and uncover all of these things that it's almost like a scavenger hunt, like for your own work, right? Like you've buried all this interesting stuff in the first draft and now you get to find it and unearth it, and maybe some of it you don't need, so you can chuck it, but some of it maybe it's like really exciting. Learning to find joy in editing and actually find it like a fun part of the writing process, and also just trust myself as an editor, has been game changing for my writing process. I don't really have to stress as much in the drafting phase because I just believe and I just know that I can fix it later. So I think that that is honestly like the most important lesson that I've learned about writing, is just trusting my abilities as an editor. Lesson number 2 is something that I don't really see talked about enough. You're allowed your own philosophy on writing. So different writers have different philosophies on writing, things they value, practices they value, beliefs they have about craft and art, etc. I'll let you in on a little tea right now. The people who think that others are wrong because their philosophy on writing and art is different, so their philosophy, their way that they engage with creativity, the types of stories they like, the methods they use, what they value in art, what art means to them, etc., etc. The people who think that because other people's philosophies on art and writing are different means that they are wrong, those are the people who are never going to progress in their craft because they're too busy judging other people to actually care about their own work and just sit with their own art, right? Like they're too insecure about their own art and their own methods and their own philosophy on writing, and so they project that into judgment on other people. And so they're never going to progress because they are putting their energy in completely the wrong place. I think it's wrong to say, like, if I came on here and I was like, if you don't have the same beliefs in writing and don't do the same methods as me, then you're a bad writer. Like, I think that there's a problem with that. Someone just holding their own philosophy on writing and not a threat to you, and also, like, that's inherent. Everyone's relationship to art is going to be different, and everyone should and can develop their own philosophy on writing. So it's okay to have your own philosophy on writing and develop your own philosophy on writing. I think that's really important. Just like asking yourself, what do you value? What works for you? Why do you write? What do you care about in art and in writing? On a personal level, if I just shut out every other voice, what matters to me? What do I value in art? What works for me? What is important for me? Why do I write? Like, what excites me about writing? What are my personal beliefs about what stories mean to me? That's really important, I think, to develop for yourself outside of what other people are saying, and just like find some sense of stability and confidence with your own beliefs about writing and create your own writing philosophy. And it probably never will perfectly align with someone else's. And I think that too much friction in the writing community comes from a lack of understanding of the fact that there is never and there shouldn't be a universal philosophy on writing. Like, people are going to have different relationships to art and value different things, and that's fine and that's good. And I think there would just be a lot less friction if there was just a general and real understanding that it's okay to have different values and different writing philosophy, and as long as you're not like bullying other people or shaming other people for their writing philosophy, then that's fine. Other people don't have to have the same writing philosophy as you for yours to be valid. I think if that was just like generally understood, there would be way less conflict and way less friction in the writing community, because there would be less insecurity, because people wouldn't feel threatened by others disagreeing, you know? Art is very personal and very sometimes emotional and kind of fluid and kind of amorphous and can come from really deep personal places. And so, yeah, obviously other people who have different experiences are going to have different relationships to art and writing and have different philosophies about writing. And that's informed by their experiences. They aren't a threat to each other. And I think if we all put more time into sitting with and just thinking about our own philosophies on writing and thinking about our own values rather than feeling threatened by other people's, everyone would be a lot happier, and the energy would be going into the right place rather than the wrong place. Tip number 3, the phrase "the reader knows best" is a lie, because that's impossible. But let's say you publish a book and 500 people read it. So how can the reader know best when every single one of those 500 people is going to have a different opinion and reaction to the work? It also just puts the emphasis, I think, in the wrong place. Writing to cater to others will never make you happy, and I have talked about this in past videos, because you will constantly feel like you are just playing catch up. Someone will say the pacing of your book was too slow, and so you'll make it faster. And then someone will say the pacing of your book was too fast, and so you'll make it slower. Someone will say the plot was too predictable, and so you'll try to make it more unpredictable. And then someone will say, well, it wasn't foreshadowed enough. And so then you'll go add some foreshadowing. And then people will go, but now it was too predictable again. And those are very basic general examples that don't even get into the specific nuances of individual stories, which are probably going to be a lot more complex and a lot more personal to you. That doesn't mean don't take feedback. And I think that's the black and white thinking that sometimes emerges with these types of discussions. Feedback is very important, but there's a difference between taking feedback to cater to someone else's tastes and taking feedback because it makes what you want to do with the story better. I love getting feedback on my work. Too many times I've talked about this idea that you have to be a little selfish and prioritize your art and your vision, and gotten a response of like, well, you just can't take feedback. I love getting feedback on my work. There is a difference between writing to cater to feedback, especially feedback after the fact, like after something has been published, versus getting genuine feedback that you can actually implement in a way that resonates with you. You can absolutely take and implement feedback while still staying true to yourself. Feedback is not an antagonistic thing. It might feel that way, especially if you're looking at, say, reviews after the fact. A lot of feedback, at least as it should be, is a collaborative thing, and so it's actually not done to contradict your vision. It's just meant to help develop it. That also means being able to trust yourself before you trust other people. You need to, in the hierarchy of who you trust most with your work, you need to be number one, right? In the end, you're gonna spend years of your life on this book, and then someone who reads it is gonna spend a couple hours reading it. Is the goal of writing really to write a book that is, I guess, palatable to the highest number of people? I don't believe that it is. At that point, how are you going to be able to say something with your work? Like, if you have something that you want to say, I think that gets drowned out if you're just writing to cater to opinions on the work that are maybe grounded around more superficial things and will always contradict. Like, there will always be contradictory feedback on those things. And so it's most important to trust in yourself more than anyone else. Number 4, you're allowed to be a beginner. In fact, I'd say that it's good to be a beginner and you should strive to always be a beginner. I think there's something beautiful in being a beginner, and no matter how long you've been writing, you can always, in a way, be a beginner. Improving your craft and developing as a writer means continually expanding your skill set and the types of work you write, and that's going to mean continually, in some ways, being a beginner at something, right? In some way, unless you write books that are basically the same over and over and over, you're probably going to be a beginner in a sense with every book that you write. And I think that being a beginner is a beautiful thing. And I think that having a beginner's mindset where you're open and you're curious and you're excited and you want to learn is maybe better than having a advanced mindset where maybe there isn't as much of a willingness to learn. Sometimes feel with writing that there's this expectation that you have to be good immediately, and that writers feel like they aren't allowed to go through the beginning stages or even the intermediate stages. Like, you just have to be advanced immediately. I definitely felt that pressure growing up. Because I loved writing, that meant I had to be amazing at it immediately. Well, guess what? I wasn't amazing immediately. And that led to a lot of embarrassment and insecurity and shame around my work, which took out the fun of being a beginner. Being a beginner is like actually a beautiful place to be, and if anything, we can kind of always strive to be beginners in some way and just take that mindset. No matter how long you've been writing, even if you've been writing for decades, like, take that excitement, that openness of being a beginner into every piece that you write. You never want to reach a point where you're like, I don't have anything left to learn. Every piece of writing you create is going to be different and involve, if you want to create work, I think that is like nuanced and compelling, is going to involve some new sense of introspection, reaching a point of, I have nothing left to learn, I am a fully formed writer. Like, no one's ever going to be there, even like the greatest writers in the world. And so I think it's better to just embrace like continual beginnerness. Tip number 5, there are reasons we write and create that are so much more important than just to make something good. Like, literally, what even is that? It can be really easy to get caught up in this very like reductionist but also kind of like impossible idea of, I just have to create something good. Like, literally, what is good? A lot of the books that I personally think have like the most amazing craft I've ever seen in my life, that are like, I view them as like, they are my Bible. Like, I think that these books are like what I strive for as a writer. They have tons of terrible reviews of people who absolutely hated them. Good, like, doesn't really exist. I think it's more important, instead of your goal being to create something good, ask why you truly write, right? Like, maybe it's as a means of just like interrogating existence, of being curious about humanity. Whatever it is that you write, I can't tell you what reason that is. There are probably infinite reasons, right? As many reasons as there are people who create. I think that that's so much important than to create something good. For me, when I write, I think my goal is to be honest about a human experience while still being like compassionate to it. I think maybe, I don't know, I could honestly make a whole, maybe it depends on the piece, but I think that I would say that that's my like, often my goal is I feel like there's a catharsis in being just honest about the confusion and the weirdness and the pain of like being a person. My goal is, I think, to like not obscure that and like portray that honestly with like a clarity, but in a way that is like compassionate to that, maybe that pain and that messiness. I think I'd say that that's like, but I don't know, it could be something completely different for you. And maybe on a different day I would have a different answer to that question, to be honest. So I think that one thing that can kind of harm your writing process is getting too caught up in good being the end goal. Like, there are bigger, more important reasons to create than good. And good is kind of a trap. Like, I don't fall into the trap of good, because literally, what is that? I don't know if that even really matters. Like, in the end, a book being good is maybe not as important as it being alive or open or curious or interested in something. Those things which maybe we equate to goodness in the end are like more important than good. Like, what is good? I don't really know. And so I think that it's maybe not the most helpful bar to use for your work. And I know that I use that word a lot, and I want to try and get away from that, from labeling my work as good as if that is the goal, the most important end goal. And finally, number 6, kind of building off that, what actually makes impactful writing is actually stuff that can't be taught. It can be honed, it can be learned. Like, there are a lot of skills in writing that can be learned, but they cannot be taught. And they can be honed through the experience of writing, but also, if anything, through just being like interested in life and people. The reason I write at like a very basic level is just because I'm very interested by people and like what it feels like to exist. I think that a lot of writers feel that, I think that that's true for a lot of writers. Maybe not that exact thing, but there's some element of being a person that you find compelling. Really developing as a writer, most of it is going to come from a sensitivity and an interest in life, in people, in humanity, in existence, etc., etc. Whatever the like focus of depth in your work is. Studying story structure and how to line at it like really only gets you so far. If we consider that the science aspect of writing, and I use that term very loosely, but if we consider that the science aspect of writing, but neglect the emotional aspect, which can't really be taught, but that doesn't mean it can't be learned. It can be learned, but it's just something that learning has to come from within yourself, from a certain openness, a certain sensitivity. And I think a lot of writing advice, if not all writing advice, focuses on the step-by-step of writing craft, the science of writing, and that makes sense because that is really the only aspect of writing that can be taught. And so obviously that's the stuff we're going to teach. And but by taught, I mean taught in a method like this, where I'm talking or you're reading or whatever. There are other ways of teaching that are more interactive, just like talking about your work, engaging with work in a more like fluid way. But by teaching, I mean like lecture style teaching. I think the most important thing to really create impactful work is just like engage with people and with the world. What form that takes for you depends. But I think that's the most important thing more than anything else, more than any lesson on craft. I think worrying too much about whether your book follows the rules is needless stress, to be honest. Writing craft is good if it serves you. There's a lot of writing craft that I am a total geek about. Like, you've seen me make full videos on structure, on verbs. Like, I do love that stuff. That stuff is really fun to me. It's exciting to me. I'm a total geek for it. I don't think it should be a source of worry. I think if you worry so much about following every writing rule correctly, being the perfect writer, the work doesn't have the space or the oxygen to like develop in that way. What I find most interesting about writing, why I write, as I've said a few times in this video, is like humanity, right? I'm just very interested by like what it feels like to be a person. A lot of stuff that I find most interesting about writing, stuff I find most interesting about people, and it's just that like being a person is like endlessly confusing, contradictory, and messy. Like, people are really messy. Writing rules and writing craft often contradicts that idea, right? Because it's often about like, okay, well, was this intentional? Was this set up properly? Is everything contributing to the story? But that's almost like contradictory to like what being a person is like. And so I think for me, if I get so caught up in the writing craft, the technical aspect, which I do love, like it's this weird thing that I don't fully know how to explain or reconcile, because I love writing craft. I find it really interesting, but I think there's a certain point where you can get so caught up in it that the work neglects maybe its most important aspect, which is just the realness. And the realness often maybe contradicts writing craft, bursts outside of those constraints. I think there can be room for both of those things in your work, but I think the important thing is to not fight the realness in effort to create something theoretically perfect. Does that make sense? Those things that give writing depth, they can't be taught. You're never going to learn it in a textbook. It comes from insight and sensitivity, and so I think writing without worry to the rules is how you'll actually improve, because that's when all that interesting stuff will emerge. Those were my 6 writing lessons, pep talks. My question for today, since this has come up through multiple points in the video, is why do you write? And it's complicated because there's probably multiple reasons. Like, I gave a reason, but I think I have multiple reasons. But like, if you had to just like come up with a reason, what would you say is the reason why you write? The thing that interests you, the thing that really like sparks your creativity. That is my question for today. That's what I would really like to hear. I feel like in this video I could really only conceive of my own reasons, but I'm sure everyone has their own reasons that are all really interesting. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you in another video. Bye!